Before we dive deep into the anatomy, it's very helpful if we go over the different areas, regions of our body that we can refer with one specific term, but not necessarily the term we use to talk to our friends and family. These terms are terms that will be very commonly used between people in the health field. So if you know these terms, this will be very helpful for you throughout the semester because they will keep coming up all the time. The first thing that needs to come to your mind is the anatomical position. And having that in mind, you can confidently say that this is the anterior aspect of the body, and this is the posterior aspect of the body. And another word for posterior is dorsal. So when you look here, you have the back or dorsal. Anytime you hear the word cephalic, that means head or something that's going towards the head. And that's why when I said that we have the anatomical directional term cephalic or cranial, is the same thing as superior. It's something that's superior because our head is at the top part of our body, right? And the word cranial is what's commonly known as skull. So later on, when we study the cranial bones, so the skull bones, you see that they get together and they form what's known as cranial cavity, which is the bony structure that houses and protects our brain. Orbital and ocular mean eye. Buccal means cheek. Oral means mouth. And you can remember that you have oral presentations. And an oral presentation is when you're presenting your work by talking, so using your mouth. Cervical means neck. So you will learn about the cervical vertebrae, and those are the ones that are located in the neck region. Thoracic is the same thing as chest. Abdominal is referring to the belly. And in the abdominal region, we find the navel, which is called umbilical. And below the abdominal region, we have the pelvic region, which is the region in between the two hip bones. And here we have the inguinal region, which is the same thing as the groin. When we are referring to the thoracic, abdominal, and pelvic regions together, we say trunk or torso. So trunk is the part of our body to which our head and limbs attach to. And we have the upper limbs and the lower limbs. Now, our upper limb is formed by the arm and the forearm. Our lower limb is formed by the thigh and the leg. We cannot say leg referring to our entire lower limb because our leg is just the part that's underneath the knee. We cannot say arm referring to our entire upper limb because the arm is just the part before the elbow. Another word for arm is brachial, and that's why the muscles that we have in our arm, they have the word brachii on it. So you have the biceps brachii, the triceps brachii, for example. Another word for forearm is antebrachial, because brachial means arm, and the forearm is anterior, is before the arm. So the forearm is also called antebrachial. And ante is the root that means before. And one way you can do to remember that ante means before is, if you recall that when you go to an Italian restaurant, you can order the antipasto, which is the appetizer, the dish that you eat before the main course. So look at this. The elbow is referred as cubital. And that is the reason why the anterior aspect of the elbow is named antecubital, because it is anterior, it is before the elbow. And now you can look at me and say, what do you mean before the elbow? And I can tell you it's before the elbow because everything in anatomy is in relationship to the anatomical position. And we already talked that the anatomical position, the person is facing forward and the arms are extended and the palms of the hands are facing forward. Consequently, the antecubital is anterior to the cubital region. Axilla is the same thing as armpit. Hand is manual. And now you understand the meaning of manual work, which is the type of work that you do with your hands, manual. Palm is the same thing as palmar. and refers to the anterior aspect of our hands. The posterior aspect of our hands is named dorsal. Carpal is the same thing as wrist, and you can recall that people have carpal tunnel syndrome, and they need to wear a wrist support. Thumb is referred as pollex, and the digits are referred as phalanges. Going down to the lower limb, we have again the thigh before the knee and the leg after the knee, and another name for leg is crua. The anterior, the front aspect of the knee is what we call patellar, and the back of the knee is what we call popliteal. And you see that when we are studying blood vessels, in the back of the knee, you have the popliteal vein, the popliteal artery, and you have a muscle that's named popliteus. Also looking here in the posterior aspect of the body, we find the gluteal region, which is the same thing as buttock. And when you're learning muscles, you learn that the most prominent muscle in the gluteal region is the gluteus maximus. The foot is called pedal, and now it makes sense that we have the accelerator and brake pedals because we use our foot to control them. The toes are called digits or phalanges, the same word that we use to describe the digits in the hands. But when we look at the big toe, then it has a different name. It is called hallux. So the thumb is called pollex, and the big toe is called hallux. The ankle is the same thing as tarsal, and don't confuse tarsal with carpal. Carpal is in the hand, and tarsal is in the foot. The top part of the foot is called dorsal, and the bottom, the sole of the foot, is called plantar. And the heel is referred as calcaneal.